Rahim loved mountains more than anything. Since he was a child, he had spent every free moment walking through hills, climbing rocks, and exploring hidden valleys. The mountains made him feel free. The air was fresh, and he could hear the sound of birds and the wind among the trees. Today, he decided to explore a new trail he had discovered on an old map. The trail was less traveled, and no one he knew had ever gone that way. He packed his bag carefully, carrying water, food, a flashlight, and a small first aid kit. He wore sturdy shoes and a warm jacket, as the mornings were cold even in the early summer. Rahim started his journey just as the sun began to rise. The sky was painted with pink and orange, and a soft mist covered the valleys. He enjoyed every step, feeling the rocks under his feet and breathing the clean mountain air. The path was steep in some parts, but he liked the challenge. He often stopped to look around. Small streams ran along the trail, and colorful flowers bloomed beside the rocks. Sometimes he heard squirrels or rabbits rustling in the bushes. Everything felt calm and beautiful. After walking for 2 hours, Rahim reached a part of the mountain where the trees became sparse. The rocks were bigger and the trail was narrow. He had to climb carefully. A strong wind blew over the ridge, making him hold his hat tightly. He stopped to rest on a large rock and ate a sandwich. As he looked around, he noticed a strange shape in the distance. At first, it looked like a large rock, but it seemed too big and too sharp-edged to be natural. Curious, Rahim decided to move closer. As he approached, his heart began to beat faster. What he saw made him stop. It was a tank, sitting alone on the mountain peak. Its metal body was old and covered with rust, moss, and scratches. The cannon pointed upward toward the sky like it was guarding the clouds. Rahim could not understand why a tank would be on this mountain. The trail was narrow and steep, and there was no road that could have carried such a heavy vehicle. It seemed impossible. He walked slowly around the tank, examining it carefully. The metal was cold to touch, and some parts had fallen off. The tracks in the ground were faint, almost invisible, as if the tank had not moved in many years. Rahim felt both fear and curiosity. The tank looked abandoned, yet something about it felt strange. It was as if it had been left there for a purpose. Rahim decided to look inside. He opened the hatch and climbed carefully. The interior was dark and smelled old and musty. There were seats, controls, and panels with faded labels. Some buttons were broken and wires hung loose. On the floor, he saw papers scattered everywhere. Most of them were torn or wet, but he picked up a few that were readable. There were old maps, sketches, and documents. The handwriting was hurried and difficult to read, but Rahim could make out warnings about a dangerous mission and secret locations. He did not understand everything, but it was clear that the tank had been used for something important. Among the papers, Rahim found a small leather journal. The cover was cracked and the pages were yellowed with age. He opened it carefully. The writing inside was messy, full of notes about mountains, hidden valleys, and instructions to protect something valuable. There were also sketches of strange symbols and marks that he could not recognize. One page caught his attention. It mentioned a hidden place at the peak where danger waits. The word sent a chill down his spine. Rahim looked around the empty mountain, feeling suddenly alone. He stepped out of the tank and sat on a rock nearby, thinking, why would someone leave a tank here? What was the hidden danger mentioned in the journal? Could it be something dangerous left behind by soldiers? Rahim's mind raced with questions. He felt excitement but also fear. The mountain that had always been peaceful now felt mysterious and threatening. Rahim decided to explore the area around the tank. The peak was wider than he expected. There were rocks, small bushes, and patches of grass. From here, he could see valleys stretching in all directions. The view was beautiful, but he could not enjoy it fully. His thoughts kept returning to the tank and the journal. He wondered if someone had tried to hide the tank here intentionally. Maybe it was part of a secret mission. He could not imagine carrying a heavy tank up a mountain, but the evidence was right in front of him. As he walked around, he noticed something else. Small holes in the rocks and ground looked like they had been dug recently. There were signs of movement, broken branches, footprints, and disturbed soil. Rahim's curiosity grew. Maybe the tank was not as old as it seemed. Maybe someone had been here recently, hiding something or checking the area. His heart beat faster. The quiet mountain suddenly felt full of secrets. Rahim decided to rest for a while. He sat on a large boulder and took out his water bottle. He tried to calm his mind. The journal was heavy in his bag. He wanted to read more, but he also wanted to be careful. He did not know if anyone was watching him from the surrounding peaks. The wind blew softly, and the mountain was silent again. The peacefulness was almost comforting, but he could not shake the feeling that something unusual had happened here. After resting, Rahim stood up and looked at the tank again. He decided to inspect it one last time before continuing his hike. He walked around the back and noticed a small hatch. It was locked, but the lock was old and rusty. He tried to open it gently, and with a little force it gave way. Inside he saw a small compartment with more papers, tools, and a metal box. The box was heavy and had a strange symbol carved into it. Rahim's hands shook as he touched it. He could not open it without a key, but he felt that whatever was inside was important. Rahim sat again, thinking. The mountain had always been a place for him to find peace, but now it had become a place of mystery. He felt a mix of fear, curiosity, and excitement. The tank, the journal, and the metal box were all part of a secret he had discovered by chance. He wondered who had left them here and why. The sun was rising higher, casting golden light over the peaks. Rahim knew he had to continue his hike, but he could not leave the tank behind without understanding it. He decided to take some of the papers and the journal with him. Maybe they would give him clues later. He carefully packed them into his bag. He looked at the tank one last time. It seemed quiet, almost waiting. Rahim could not explain why, but he felt that the mountain had chosen him to find this secret. As he began to walk down the trail, he could not stop thinking about the hidden danger mentioned in the journal. The tank had been abandoned, but its presence suggested something more. Rahim's mind raced with possibilities. He wondered if other people had discovered it before him. He wondered if the danger was still there, waiting. The mountain path led him through narrow ridges and over small streams. He paused occasionally to look back at the peak where the tank stood silently. The view was breathtaking. The valley below was covered in morning mist, and the rivers shone like silver. Rahim felt both amazed and uneasy. He had found something extraordinary, something that no one else seemed to know about. By the time he reached a flat area to rest, Rahim's thoughts were full of questions. The tank, the journal, and the hidden danger were all mysteries that he wanted to solve. He knew that his hike had changed from a simple adventure into something much bigger. The mountain had a secret, and he had discovered it. Rahim felt a mix of excitement and fear. He could not wait to find out more, but he also knew that the journey would not be easy. He ate a small meal and drank some water, thinking about what to do next. The journal had clues, but they were not clear. The metal box inside the tank could hold answers, but he could not open it yet. Rahim decided that he would return to the tank soon, better prepared to continue uncovering its secrets. For now he needed to rest, regain his energy, and plan his next move carefully. The mountain around him was calm again. Birds sang, and the wind whispered through the trees. Rahim looked toward the peak where the tank waited silently. He felt that this adventure had only just begun. Whatever the reason the tank was there, he was determined to discover it. He took a deep breath, feeling the cold mountain air fill his lungs. Rahim knew that the mountain had changed him forever, and that the secret of the tank was something he could not ignore. Rahim returned home that evening feeling both excited and uneasy. The memory of the tank on the mountain peak would not leave his mind. The journal he had found weighed heavily in his bag. Its pages were old and fragile, filled with hurried writing, maps, and strange symbols. Rahim carefully placed it on the table in his small room. He spread out the papers he had taken from inside the tank. Some of them were torn, others had faded writing, but all seemed connected. Rahim began reading the journal slowly. The first entries were about a military unit that had been stationed in the mountains long ago. The writing spoke of training exercises, secret missions, and testing equipment in remote locations. The person who wrote the journal appeared to be an officer or engineer, responsible for moving the tank to the mountain peak. The entries described the challenges of moving such a heavy vehicle up steep trails. Rahim's curiosity grew. The writer had left the tank on the mountain intentionally, but the reason was not clear. One entry caught Rahim's attention. It described a protected site on the peak, something hidden from everyone. The writer mentioned that the tank was left to guard the site and that it contained dangerous or valuable equipment. The words were careful but urgent, warning anyone who found it to be cautious. Rahim could feel the fear and respect in the writer's tone. Whoever had left the tank had taken the danger seriously. Rahim's thoughts returned to the metal box inside the tank. The journal hinted that it might contain important items or documents related to the protected site. Rahim wanted to find out more, but he knew he could not do it alone. He needed help. The next morning he contacted his close friend, Bilal, who shared his love for mountains and exploration. Bilal agreed to join him on the next hike, promising to bring climbing gear, ropes, and tools to open the box safely. The next day, Rahim and Bilal began their climb early. The air was crisp, and the sky was clear. As they moved up the trail, they talked quietly about the tank and the journal. Bilal listened intently, his eyes wide with interest. He had never heard of anything like this before. The hike was challenging, but both friends were experienced and careful. They stopped occasionally to drink water, eat snacks, and enjoy the view. When they reached the ridge where the tank waited, Rahim felt a mix of relief and excitement. The sun was higher now, and the peak was bright with sunlight. The tank looked the same as before, silent and still. But now, with the presence of another person, the mystery felt more real. Rahim showed Bilal the journal and the papers he had brought. They studied them together, trying to understand the directions and symbols written by the old officer. Bilal pointed to a sketch of a small cave behind the tank. The journal had mentioned a hidden entrance, and Rahim realized this must be it. They approached the rocks carefully, looking for anything unusual. There was a small gap between two boulders, almost hidden by moss and dirt. Rahim pushed aside some of the stones, and Bilal shone his flashlight inside. The space was narrow, but it appeared to lead into a small cave or tunnel. Rahim's heart beat faster. Could this be the protected site mentioned in the journal? He remembered the warnings about danger, but curiosity was stronger than fear. The two friends decided to explore carefully. Bilal went first, shining the light ahead. The tunnel was damp and cool, and the walls were rough rock. They moved slowly, listening to each sound. The mountain seemed quiet, almost holding its breath. After a few minutes, they reached a wider space inside the cave. Rahim's eyes widened as he saw remnants of old equipment, tools, and containers. The air smelled of metal and earth. It was clear that this place had been used long ago, but it had been abandoned for many years. There were crates stacked neatly, and some had markings similar to the symbols in the journal. Rahim and Bilal carefully opened one crate. Inside were old mechanical parts, maps, and documents. Nothing looked dangerous, but it was clear that someone had taken great care to protect this place. One crate, however, was locked with a rusty metal box. Rahim recognized it immediately. This was the box from the tank. He and Bilal examined it carefully. The journal had hinted that it could contain important secrets. Bilal found some tools in the cave and tried to open the box. After several attempts, they managed to lift the lid. Inside they found more maps, small devices, and papers sealed in plastic to protect them from moisture. The papers contained plans for the mountain area, details about military experiments, and sketches of the tank itself. Rahim realized that this was a record of everything that had happened here. The friends spent hours exploring the cave, carefully examining every item. The more they learned, the more fascinating the story became. The old military unit had used this peak for secret training exercises. They had tested vehicles, stored equipment, and kept documents about important projects. The tank had been left as a guardian, a silent protector of the hidden site. Rahim felt proud that he had discovered such an important secret. As the afternoon passed, Rahim noticed something unusual outside the cave. Shadows moved across the rocks. At first he thought it was just the clouds, but then he saw figures approaching the peak from the far side. He felt a chill. Who could be coming here now? The friends moved closer to the cave entrance and watched carefully. Two men were climbing quickly, carrying backpacks. They seemed experienced and careful, like they knew the mountain well. Rahim and Bilal exchanged worried glances. The journal had warned about strangers and danger. Could these men have discovered the site before them? Were they looking for the same secrets? Rahim felt his heart race. He had to think quickly. They decided to hide inside the cave and observe. The shadows of the approaching men grew larger. They stopped near the tank, examining it closely. The friends could not hear what they were saying, but it was clear they were looking for something. Rahim whispered to Bilal, suggesting they stay quiet and wait. The men spent several minutes near the tank checking the area. Then, unexpectedly, one of them lifted a piece of metal near the hatch and tried to open it. Rahim held his breath. He realized that if the men succeeded, the secrets in the metal box could be exposed. Bilal shook his head slightly, signaling that they needed a plan. They could not confront the strangers directly. They needed to protect the site. Rahim remembered the maps in the journal. There was a hidden path around the ridge, a narrow trail that could be used to flank the strangers without being seen. He whispered his idea to Bilal. Together, they moved quietly along the hidden path, staying out of sight. From this position, they could see the men more clearly. The strangers were examining the tank, unaware of the friends nearby. Rahim felt a surge of adrenaline. He knew that the mountain had chosen them to protect the secret, just as it had chosen the officer years ago. The men seemed frustrated. They could not open the hatch and were looking around for another way. Rahim realized that they were not ordinary hikers. They knew about the tank and were searching for the hidden site. Rahim and Bilal exchanged a determined look. They could not let the strangers find the secret. The friends decided to wait patiently and plan their next move carefully. Hours passed, and the sun began to descend toward the horizon. The light turned golden on the peaks. Rahim and Bilal watched silently as the strangers finally gave up and began to move back down the trail. The friends waited until they were out of sight before leaving their hiding spot. The mountain felt calm again, as if it had returned to its natural peace. Rahim felt relief, but he also understood that the mystery was not over. The strangers had known about the tank and the cave. Someone else might return to the mountain in the future. Rahim and Bilal carefully packed the items from the cave into their bags. They decided to return home before nightfall. As they descended the mountain, Rahim felt a mix of emotions. He had discovered a secret, seen the tank, and found the hidden cave. But now he knew that the mountain's mystery could attract others. The journal, the maps, and the metal box were treasures of knowledge and history. Rahim realized that he had a responsibility to protect them. By the time they reached the base of the mountain, the sky was painted with the colors of sunset. The valley below was peaceful again. Rahim felt tired but satisfied. He had uncovered a part of history hidden in the mountains. He also understood that his journey was far from over. The tank on the peak, the journal, and the cave held secrets that could take a lifetime to fully understand. Rahim looked back at the mountains, feeling respect for their beauty and mystery. He knew he would return soon, ready to continue the adventure. The next morning, Rahim woke early, feeling restless and excited. He could not stop thinking about the mountain, the tank, and the hidden cave. The previous day's events had left him both curious and cautious. The strangers who had come to the peak were still on his mind. Who were they? How did they know about the tank? Rahim knew he had to be prepared if he returned. He called Bilal, and together they planned their next hike. This time, they would bring more equipment: ropes, lanterns, gloves, and a small crowbar to handle anything they could not open by hand. They also brought a notebook to carefully record their discoveries. Rahim felt that they were close to uncovering the full secret of the mountain peak. The journal had given them clues, but there was still much they did not understand. They began their climb early in the morning. The trail was familiar, yet it felt different this time. Rahim noticed the way sunlight hit the rocks and the quiet sound of distant birds. There was a sense of purpose in their steps. Both friends moved carefully, aware that they were approaching a place that had long been hidden from the world. They climbed steadily, stopping occasionally to rest and drink water. When they reached the ridge, the tank came into view. It seemed almost alive in its silence. Rahim felt a shiver of excitement and fear. The metal box inside the tank still held the greatest mysteries. The cave behind it awaited exploration, and they hoped to find answers there. Before moving toward the cave, Rahim carefully scanned the area for any signs of the strangers from the previous day. There was no one in sight, but he remained cautious. They approached the cave entrance and checked the narrow passage. It was damp and cold, but familiar now. Bilal led the way with his lantern, shining the light ahead while Rahim followed closely behind. Inside, the cave opened into the wider chamber they had discovered before. The old crates, tools, and papers were still in place, protected from the elements. Rahim felt a sense of respect for the soldiers who had once used this place. Everything had been left carefully, as if they had planned for someone to find it one day. The friends focused on the metal box. Rahim carefully lifted it while Bilal held the lantern steady. The box was heavy, and the lid had a small lock. Using their tools, they carefully pried it open. Inside, they found a set of old documents, maps, and several small mechanical devices. Some of the documents contained instructions for operating the tank and descriptions of experiments conducted on the mountain. The maps showed hidden paths, ridges, and areas marked as restricted. Rahim realized that the mountain had been more than a training ground. It had been a secret site for testing technology. Bilal examined one of the small devices. It looked like a miniature engine, with tiny parts and gears. He turned it over in his hands and carefully studied it. Rahim looked at the documents, reading aloud some of the instructions. The writing mentioned safety precautions and warnings about dangerous experiments. It became clear to both friends that the tank had been left to guard the site, protecting the equipment and the records from being discovered by strangers. As they studied the documents, Rahim noticed a section of the journal he had not read before. It described a hidden compartment inside the tank, a place where the most important items had been stored. According to the journal, only someone who understood the maps and symbols could locate it. Rahim felt a surge of excitement. Perhaps the remaining secrets were still inside the tank. They decided to investigate. Rahim climbed back into the tank using the hatch carefully. Inside, he examined the panels and controls. There was a small floor hatch, hidden beneath a metal plate. Rahim carefully lifted it, revealing a small compartment. Inside were more papers, photographs, and a small metal cylinder. The photographs showed the mountain from years ago with soldiers moving the tank along the trail. The cylinder contained rolled-up documents, tightly sealed to protect them from moisture. Rahim and Bilal carefully unrolled the papers. They contained detailed maps of the region and instructions for transporting equipment through the mountains. The friends realized that the mountain peak had been a carefully chosen location for testing and protecting valuable items. The tank had been a guardian, left behind intentionally. The journal and documents provided clues, but the full story was still incomplete. Rahim felt that they were close to discovering the most important secret. He and Bilal decided to spend more time exploring the cave and the surrounding area, looking for additional clues. As they moved around the chamber, Bilal noticed a narrow opening behind a pile of rocks. He called Rahim over. The opening led into a smaller tunnel, partially hidden by stones and moss. Rahim felt a thrill of excitement. Could this tunnel lead to another hidden chamber? They carefully entered the passage, moving slowly. The walls were rough and damp, and the air was cool. After a few minutes, they reached a small room, barely large enough to stand in. Inside the hidden room, they found more crates and containers. Some were empty, but others held items carefully preserved. There were tools, mechanical parts, and sealed documents. One crate contained a small, unusual device that neither Rahim nor Bilal could identify. It was made of metal and glass, with intricate gears and levers. Rahim carefully examined it, noting its design and possible function. It seemed to be part of the experiments mentioned in the journal. While they explored, Rahim's mind kept returning to the strangers. If they returned, would they try to take the equipment? Rahim realized that they had a responsibility to protect the site. The mountain had chosen them as guardians, just as it had chosen the officer years ago. He felt a sense of purpose and determination. Whatever secrets the mountain held, they would not let them fall into the wrong hands. After hours of careful exploration, Rahim and Bilal decided to rest. They ate some food and drank water, reflecting on what they had discovered. The tank, the cave, the hidden tunnel, and the documents revealed a story of secrecy, planning, and danger. The mountain had been a place of training, testing, and protection. Rahim felt proud and humbled. He had uncovered something extraordinary, and he understood that their adventure was far from over. As they prepared to leave, Rahim noticed a faint sound outside the cave. At first, he thought it was the wind, but then he heard footsteps. He quickly gestured to Bilal to hide. They crouched behind some rocks near the cave entrance. Through the small opening, they saw the strangers from the previous day returning. The two men moved carefully, carrying backpacks and tools. They approached the tank, examining it with skill and precision. Rahim and Bilal watched silently, their hearts pounding. The strangers seemed to know what they were looking for. They tried to open the tank's hatch and checked the ground for hidden entrances. Rahim felt a surge of fear. If the strangers discovered the hidden tunnel or the documents, all their discoveries could be lost. He whispered to Bilal, and they quickly devised a plan. They would wait for the strangers to leave the peak, then move to secure the cave and the documents. The strangers spent some time near the tank, seemingly frustrated. They could not open the hidden compartment or locate the smaller tunnel. Finally, after several minutes, they moved away, following a different path down the mountain. Rahim and Bilal waited until they were out of sight before emerging from their hiding spot. The mountain returned to its quiet calm, as if nothing had happened. Rahim and Bilal decided to descend the mountain carefully. They took extra precautions to carry the documents, maps, and small devices safely. The hike down was long, but the friends felt a sense of accomplishment. They had uncovered secrets, explored hidden chambers, and protected the mountain's mysteries. Rahim realized that the tank on the peak was more than a relic. It was a guardian, a symbol of planning, secrecy, and responsibility. By the time they reached the base of the mountain, the sun was setting. The sky glowed with colors of orange and red. Rahim looked back at the peak, feeling awe and respect. The mountain had hidden its secrets for years, and now it had trusted them with part of its story. He knew that the adventure was not over. There were still mysteries to uncover, dangers to avoid, and history to preserve. Rahim felt ready for whatever came next. The next morning, Rahim woke with determination. The mountain peak and the tank had been on his mind since the previous hike. He knew that the metal box, the documents, and the hidden tunnel were just part of a larger secret. Rahim packed carefully, making sure to include food, water, ropes, gloves, and his notebook. He called Bilal, and they agreed to meet at the trailhead early. Today they planned to stay longer at the peak and explore areas they had not yet reached. The climb was familiar, but the air felt different. The morning mist hung low in the valleys, and the sunlight shone through the trees in soft beams. Rahim and Bilal moved steadily, careful on the rocky paths. They did not speak much, each lost in thoughts about the hidden tunnel, the tank, and the documents they had discovered. The previous encounters with the strangers reminded them to stay alert. Every shadow, every sound could be important. When they reached the ridge, the tank came into view, silent and imposing. Rahim felt a sense of respect for the old vehicle. It had been abandoned on the peak for years, yet it seemed to guard the mountain with purpose. They approached the tank and carefully examined the metal box inside again. This time they focused on understanding the devices and documents more thoroughly. Rahim noted down details in his notebook, copying the maps and symbols carefully. He felt that each discovery was a piece of a puzzle. Bilal suggested exploring more of the surrounding area. According to the maps and sketches in the journal, there were hidden paths and natural formations near the peak that could lead to more discoveries. They began walking along a narrow ridge, following a trail marked on the maps. The path was steep, with loose rocks and bushes along the edges. Rahim led carefully, watching every step. The mountain demanded attention, and both friends felt the thrill of adventure mixed with the weight of responsibility. After a few minutes, they came across a small plateau hidden behind rocks. Here the ground was flatter, with patches of grass and small shrubs. Rahim noticed markings on the rocks that matched symbols in the journal. Bilal found a small depression in the earth, almost hidden as if someone had dug here long ago. Rahim carefully cleared the dirt and stones. Beneath they found a metal cover partially buried. It was old and rusted, but it looked like it could be opened. Rahim's heart beat faster. Could this be another hidden compartment, connected to the tank and the tunnel? Using their tools, they carefully lifted the cover. Inside was a small chamber, just large enough to hold a few crates and containers. Rahim and Bilal pulled the crates out one by one. Each was sealed carefully, and the labels matched some of the symbols in the journal. Inside, they found more documents, photographs, and mechanical devices. Some of the papers described experiments conducted on the mountain, including tests of vehicles, tools, and navigation techniques. Others contained maps of hidden paths, ridges, and valleys surrounding the peak. Rahim realized that the mountain had been a central location for secret operations, and the tank had been left as a guardian. Among the crates, they found a small, carefully wrapped bundle. Inside were photographs of soldiers moving the tank along the mountain trails. The pictures showed the challenges of transporting such a heavy vehicle up steep slopes and narrow paths. Rahim felt amazed at the determination and planning required. The tank was not abandoned by accident. It had been placed with purpose, to protect the site and its secrets. As they explored the hidden chamber, Rahim noticed a corner of the room that seemed different. There were faint scratches on the rocks forming a pattern. He compared it with the symbols in the journal and realized that it indicated another small tunnel leading deeper into the mountain. The tunnel was narrow and dark, but Rahim felt it was worth exploring. Bilal shone his lantern inside, and the passage appeared to descend gradually. Rahim led carefully, using ropes to secure their climb. The air was cool and damp, and the walls were rough stone. After a few minutes, they reached a wider chamber. Inside, there were more crates and containers, some broken, others intact. The documents and devices here were more detailed, describing the operations of the tank and the mountain's hidden areas. One crate contained a device that appeared to be part of the tank's internal mechanisms. Bilal examined it carefully, noting how it might have been used to protect the equipment and the site. Rahim read the documents aloud, revealing instructions, warnings, and careful notes about the mountain's layout. The deeper they explored, the more they understood the importance of the tank and the mountain. The old officer had chosen this peak for its strategic location, difficult to reach and hidden from view. The tank was a sentinel, left to guard the site and its secrets from intruders. Rahim realized that the journal's warnings were serious. Anyone who stumbled upon this place without understanding its history could be in danger. As they studied the documents, Rahim noticed a page describing an experiment involving the tank itself. The officer had written about testing mechanical systems and protective measures. There were diagrams of the tank and the surrounding mountain, showing paths, caves, and tunnels. Rahim felt a sense of awe. The mountain peak had been carefully used for planning, experiments, and protection. The tank was more than a relic. It was a guardian, a symbol of the efforts taken to preserve the secrets of the mountain. Suddenly, Bilal pointed toward the entrance. He had noticed movement near the ridge. Rahim felt a chill. Could the strangers have returned? They crouched behind a rock and watched. Two figures appeared, moving quickly toward the tank. Rahim's heart raced. The strangers seemed experienced and were examining the tank and surrounding area carefully. Rahim whispered to Bilal, suggesting that they stay hidden and observe. The mountain had already chosen them to protect the secrets. Now they had to act wisely. The strangers tried to open the tank's hatch but failed. They examined the ground for hidden entrances and symbols but seemed confused. Rahim realized that the maps, documents, and journal had given them an advantage. They knew where the hidden chambers were and the strangers did not. The friends watched quietly, careful not to make any noise. Eventually, the strangers appeared frustrated and began moving away from the peak. Rahim and Bilal waited until they were out of sight before emerging from their hiding spot. With the immediate danger gone, the friends decided to secure the hidden chamber and its contents. They carefully packed the documents, devices, and photographs into their bags, making sure nothing was damaged. Rahim felt a sense of responsibility. The mountain's secrets were in their hands and they had to protect them. Bilal suggested marking the tunnels and hidden compartments carefully, so they could return safely in the future. Rahim agreed. The mountain had chosen them as guardians and they would not fail. As the sun began to set, Rahim and Bilal started their descent. The climb down was long and tiring, but the view was breathtaking. The valleys glowed in golden light and the rivers sparkled. Rahim felt a mixture of satisfaction and anticipation. They had uncovered important secrets, explored hidden tunnels, and understood the purpose of the tank. Yet he knew that the mountain still held mysteries they had not discovered. By the time they reached the base, the sky was painted with shades of pink and orange. Rahim looked back at the peak, feeling awe and respect. The tank, The hidden chambers in the journal were all part of a story of careful planning and responsibility. Rahim realized that their adventure had grown beyond exploration. It was now about preserving history and protecting secrets. The mountain had entrusted them with a duty, and he felt proud to accept it. That night, Rahim carefully reviewed the documents and photographs. He and Bilal discussed what they had discovered and planned their next visit. They would return with more equipment and continue exploring areas still marked on the maps. Rahim knew that the tank had been left for a reason, and the hidden chambers and devices were clues to understanding the full story. The mountain held history, danger, and knowledge, and they had only begun to uncover it. Rahim felt a deep connection to the peak. The mountain, the tank, and the hidden tunnels were no longer just curiosities. They were part of his journey, part of a story that had begun long before he was born. He understood the importance of patience, caution, and respect. The secrets of the tank and the mountain were valuable, and he vowed to protect them. As he drifted off to sleep, Rahim thought about the next day, the next hike, and the hidden mysteries waiting to be discovered. He felt a mix of excitement and responsibility. The mountain had shared its secrets, and he had accepted the challenge. Whatever came next, he was ready. The morning air was crisp as Rahim and Bilal prepared for their final journey to the mountain peak. They carried extra ropes, lanterns, and carefully packed their discoveries from the last visit. Rahim felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The mystery of the tank had haunted him for weeks, and now he believed they were close to uncovering the full story. Today, he hoped to understand why the tank had been left on the peak and what secrets it was guarding. The climb was steep and challenging, but Rahim and Bilal were determined. Every step brought them closer to the tank, and the surrounding mountains looked more beautiful than ever. The sun was rising, casting a golden glow on the rocky slopes. Rahim felt his heart beat faster with anticipation. He had explored much of the peak before, but the mountain now felt like a living puzzle, full of secrets waiting to be revealed. When they reached the ridge, the tank appeared in the sunlight, silent and imposing. It seemed almost alive, as if it had been waiting for them to return. Rahim felt a deep sense of respect. The vehicle had been left here deliberately, guarding something important. He and Bilal approached carefully, checking the area for any signs of the strangers who had been there before. There were no tracks, and the peak seemed calm, yet the memory of previous encounters kept them alert. They entered the cave behind the tank and carefully placed the metal box, documents, and devices in a safe corner. Rahim wanted to examine the journal again. As he read through the pages, a section he had not noticed before caught his attention. It described a final secret hidden beneath the tank itself, a chamber containing the most important items and the reason the tank had been left on the peak. Rahim felt a thrill. This was what they had been waiting for. Using ropes and tools, Rahim carefully climbed into the tank. Bilal held the lantern steady while Rahim examined the interior. Following the journal's instructions, he found a small floor hatch hidden beneath a metal plate. It was rusted and heavy, but with careful effort, Rahim lifted it. Beneath, there was a narrow tunnel leading downward. The air was cool and smelled of earth and metal. Rahim's heart raced as he shined his light into the tunnel. Bilal followed closely, and together they carefully moved down the passage. The walls were rough stone, and the tunnel descended gradually. After a few minutes, they reached a small chamber at the bottom. The space was low and narrow, but inside, they could see crates, boxes, and metal containers. The chamber was well preserved, as if it had been left untouched for decades. Rahim felt awe and curiosity. This was the heart of the mystery. They carefully opened one of the crates. Inside were maps, documents, and several mechanical devices. The papers contained detailed plans for the tank, the mountain, and hidden paths in the surrounding area. But what drew their attention most was a set of sealed documents labeled, "Protected Site. Do not open." Rahim carefully unsealed them, revealing the story that had been kept hidden for years. The documents explained that the tank had been placed on the peak during a secret mission decades ago. A military unit had chosen the location for testing and protecting experimental equipment and technology. The tank had been used not just as a vehicle, but as a guardian. Its weight, size, and location made it impossible for intruders to remove or move. The mountain itself was a natural defense, and the tank was the first line of protection. The documents described how the unit had transported the tank up narrow trails using ropes, pulleys, and careful planning. The mission had been dangerous and required months of preparation. Once the tank reached the peak, it was left in place to safeguard the hidden chamber and its contents. The equipment stored inside included tools, mechanical devices, and documents critical for testing vehicles and technology in remote areas. The tank ensured that only someone knowledgeable could reach the hidden chamber safely. Rahim read further and discovered that the journal they had found was written by the officer in charge of the mission. He had left instructions, maps, and warnings for anyone who might stumble upon the site in the future. The journal's symbols and notes were designed to guide trustworthy explorers while discouraging those who might misuse the technology. The officer had understood the importance of secrecy and had left the tank as a silent sentinel, protecting the mountain's secrets for generations. Bilal examined one of the devices in the crates. It appeared to be part of the tank's control system, designed to maintain its position and monitor the area. The documents explained that the device could alert the unit to any intruders. Though most of the technology was no longer functional, the purpose had been clear. The tank was not just a relic, it was a guardian and a warning. Rahim realized that the mountain, the tank, and the hidden chambers had been part of a careful plan, a way to preserve important history and technology in a place safe from the world. As they explored further, Rahim noticed photographs showing the tank being moved along the trails by soldiers years ago. The images showed the difficulty of transporting such a heavy vehicle over steep slopes and rocky paths. Each step of the operation had been documented carefully. Rahim felt respect for the planning, effort, and determination it had taken to place the tank on the peak. It was a story of courage, responsibility, and careful foresight. After hours of exploration, Rahim and Bilal realized that they had uncovered the full reason the tank had been left on the mountain. It was not abandoned, forgotten, or random. The tank had been deliberately placed as a guardian, protecting hidden chambers containing important technology and documents. The journal, maps, and devices had been left to guide careful explorers while warning intruders. Rahim felt a sense of responsibility. They were now the stewards of this secret, entrusted with preserving the history and protecting the mountain. As they prepared to leave the hidden chamber, Rahim felt a sense of peace. The mystery had been solved, and the purpose of the tank was clear. The mountain had been a silent witness to careful planning and protection. Rahim and Bilal carefully packed the documents and devices, making sure they remained safe. They decided to return home, reflecting on the incredible history they had uncovered. On the descent, Rahim looked back at the tank still sitting silently on the peak. It seemed to watch over the mountain as if approving their efforts. The friends moved carefully, aware of the steep trails and the responsibility they now carried. Each step felt significant, knowing they had been part of a story that had begun long before their time. By the time they reached the base, the sun was beginning to set. The sky was painted with shades of orange and red, and the valley below glowed in the evening light. Rahim felt awe at the beauty of the mountain and respect for its history. The tank, the hidden chambers, and the documents were all part of a carefully preserved secret, and he felt proud to have uncovered it. That night, Rahim and Bilal reviewed their discoveries. They made plans to document everything safely, ensuring that technology and history remained protected. They knew that the mountain had chosen them as guardians, just as it had chosen the officer years ago. The responsibility was heavy, but both friends felt ready to honor it. Rahim reflected on what he had learned. The tank had not been left by accident. It had been placed with purpose as a guardian of history, technology, and knowledge. The mountain peak had been a testing site, a safe haven, and a protected location. The strangers who had appeared before had been a reminder that the secret was valuable, but the careful planning of the unit had ensured that only careful, respectful explorers could uncover it. In the following weeks, Rahim and Bilal continued to study the documents, maps, and devices. They visited the mountain occasionally, making sure the hidden chambers remained undisturbed. They shared their discoveries with trusted experts who helped them understand the technology and preserve the history. The story of the tank on the peak became known to a small circle of historians and engineers, all sworn to keep the mountain's secrets safe. Rahim felt a deep connection to the mountain, the tank, and the hidden chambers. The experience had taught him patience, responsibility, and respect for history. He understood that some secrets were meant to be protected and that careful planning could preserve knowledge for generations. The tank had been more than a relic. It had been a guardian, a teacher, and a symbol of foresight. Years later, Rahim would often return to the mountain, remembering the first time he saw the tank on the peak. Each visit reminded him of the adventure, the discoveries, and the responsibility he had accepted. The tank remained in place, silent and watchful, guarding the hidden chambers and the history of the mountain. Rahim knew that its story would continue to inspire careful explorers, historians, and those who respected the value of secrets well kept. In the end, the tank on the mountain peak had fulfilled its purpose. It had protected the hidden chambers, guided explorers, and preserved history. Rahim and Bilal had uncovered its story, understood its purpose, and ensured that its secrets remained safe. The mountain, the tank, and the hidden chambers were no longer mysteries. They were a legacy, a testament to careful planning, courage, and respect for the past. Rahim felt peace as he looked up at the peak one last time. The adventure had begun with curiosity and had ended with understanding and responsibility. The tank had been left for a reason, and now its story was known.